Hello and welcome into another edition of Wrestling with Rusty right here on YouTube for November 12th, 2024. Welcome in. For those of you that contacted me today regarding Dirty Dutch Mantel and the GoFundMe, please go to GoFundMe, type in Dutch Mantel, leave the dirty off of it. Dutch Mantel and the GoFundMe instructions should come up. Cornette, Jericho, and some other folks donated, but anything you can do would be greatly appreciated to the family. In Dutch's case, as I said in a previous video, um, Dutch and other wrestlers of his generation don't make a lot of money like a lot of the guys do today. So do what you can if you can do anything. If you can't do anything, then spread the word about the GoFundMe project. Anyway, today's edition, we're going to talk to a lady that, well, I'm going to let her explain it to you. I'm just going to call her the Pro Wrestling Granny and ask her, Granny, just exactly how did you get into wrestling and why, or why and how?
Well, thank you, Rusty, for having me on your podcast. I mean, I'm totally honored to do this to help you out with this. Gosh, I have been a wrestling fan for many years. And I was actually given this name, Granny Hulkster, probably, oh my goodness, probably 15, maybe 16 years ago by a former coworker of mine. And I said, Granny Hulkster? I said, why are you going to call me that? He said, because you love wrestling. And that's true, fans. I do love wrestling. I do love professional wrestling. I love the old school wrestling. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of professional wrestlers in the business over the years that I've met. Um, and so I had a very good friend of mine. She passed away a couple years ago. She actually made me my first Granny Hulkster shirt like several years ago. It says, what you gonna do when Granny Hulkster goes crazy on you? And I mean, that t-shirt is full of autographs of wrestlers that I have met over the years. Um, I don't like the heels. I despise the heels. We have
And
a
now, wait a
love.
minute, if I can stop you there for a minute. Now, are you saying that your character as Granny Hulkster doesn't like the heels, or you mean you don't like the heels personally?
I don't like the heels, and Granny doesn't like the heels. Okay, I don't
Okay.
like the heels. So the bad guys, they'll sit there and they'll tell me, why don't you sit down and shut up before you break a hip? Isn't it past your bedtime? Don't you have a curfew at the nursing home, Granny? You know, the nursing home's waiting for you to come back home. I mean, things like that. I have slapped wrestlers. I have been handcuffed to managers. I have had wrestlers land in my lap. I have had wrestlers land in my feet. I have actually, a couple of different times, I have been in the ring as interim general manager for a couple of different wrestling events that I was a part of, you know? So, because in Arkansas, where I live, you don't have to have a license to wrestle anymore.
Well,
So,
to be honest with you, let me stop you there for a second. By the way, fans, I just noticed what Granny told me before we went on the air, and I didn't change it. I'll put in the R in Granny. Right now it says Ganny, but it should say Granny. So I'll change the R after we get through recording. But anyway, to the main point I was going to try to make is I don't really understand why anybody should have to have a wrestling license. I personally think it's a racket because um, wrestling, as you know, is a show and it's predetermined. It's not real. Kayfabe was broken long ago, so I don't know why anybody has to have a wrestling license. So I applaud you, not you personally, but you as in the state of Arkansas for not having to have a wrestling license. That's amazing.
well, you know, like I said, I help with a lot of different wrestling, independent wrestling shows in Arkansas, Oklahoma. I help with an organization called Wrestling for a Cause there in Oklahoma, and they just had their 13th year anniversary show. October 26th, I believe it was, they started Wrestling for a Cause for a little boy by the name of Ryder, Jack Herring. I never got to meet Ryder, but I know his family. And they do shows for kids fighting childhood cancer. Matter of fact, just Sunday, we had a show for a little boy by the name of Liam. He had an amazing time. And I actually got to meet Liam and his dad. Really personable little boy. He had the best time. I mean, he had the greatest time. And that's what I love about Wrestling for a Cause. They help kids, they help adults. Like I said, I've been a part of it pretty much from day one. My husband and my son are both wrestling fans, and I'll talk about my husband a little bit here later in the
Sure.
podcast. But we, my husband was the biggest wrestling fan, just as I was, and I'll go ahead and just mention what happened.
Sure. To the extent that you feel like doing, yes.
Yeah. Last August on my birthday, my husband was 71 years old. He was still working. He was still full-time employed. He was working for the Washington County Road Department in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we found out he had a tumor on his liver, blocking his
Oh,
one bile duct. And after 3
terrible.
hospitals in Tulsa, 2 biliary drain procedures, he came back to Springdale, where I live, Springdale, Arkansas, and went into a nursing facility because I didn't have the space to keep him at home in a hospital bed. I ended up bringing in Circle of Life Hospice January 18th of this year, and unfortunately, he lost his battle with cancer February 20th, 5 days before his 72nd birthday. Now, I mentioned Wrestling for a Cause. Well, Wrestling for a Cause, they not only help kids, but they help adults. And they did a show for my husband December 2nd of last year in Tulsa. And I
Okay.
was very blessed and very humbled by the fact that they wanted to do this, because I've known the promoter even before he ever started Wrestling for a Cause. And I told Tim, I said, well, David and I, the kids come first. And he said, Granny, he says, we're doing this for you all. And it's been, needless to say, it's been very challenging for me. He only lasted 7 months after we found out about the cancer. He's been gone right at 9 months, and he died February 20th. So in a matter of less than 3 months' time, I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. I had to take my dogs to a rescue shelter in Stillwell, Oklahoma called Paws and Hooves because I couldn't find them a good home. They were both 60-pound dogs, and I knew I couldn't keep them in a 1-bedroom apartment. It wouldn't have been fair to them, and I ended up selling my house. So just a matter of 2 or 3 months, just boom, 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 my whole world just got flipped upside down. And if it wasn't for my wrestling family, I honestly don't know how I would have made it as far as I have. I am so thankful for my wrestling family. I am so blessed by my wrestling family. I love my wrestling family. And I just, I don't know what I would do without them. I'm so blessed by them.
I understand what you mean, but before I add something to what you just said, let me back up and say that I did this privately, but I want to publicly send you my condolences and tell you that while I don't go to church and I probably don't even read the Bible the way I should, I do believe in the Lord, and I know there's a heaven and a hell. And from just knowing you without even knowing your husband, I just got to believe he's in a better place. That might not give you much comfort right now, but hopefully somewhere down the road that's going to give you some good comfort.
Well, I do know that he's in a better place. And, the whole ironic thing about this, Rusty, is the whole time he fought this battle, he kept saying, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to beat this. Now, my husband, God rest his soul, he very seldom ever got sick. So to find out that he had the tumor, to find out that he had the cancer was totally shocking, because the first time he was in the hospital, he told the doctors, he says, this is the first time I've been in a hospital since I was 14 years old to have my tonsils out. I mean, that's just, he never got sick. And so, as I said, my whole world just, I mean, he was my best friend. He was my soulmate. He was the best thing that ever happened to me and my son. And, I know one day I will see him again. And, I have hope in that, and I'm doing the best that I can to move on. But, that's a little bit about my personal background as far as, but I know the fans don't really want to hear about that. So let's talk wrestling. I mean, that's what we're here for.
Sure. Absolutely. So okay, so you were a wrestling fan. Let me back up and tell you this for any fans that might not know this. I have been a wrestling fan from age 3, and I'm 55 now. And while I didn't have cancer like your husband, I am a guy in a wheelchair full time with cerebral palsy, which means in my case, I don't walk or stand or move like most people do. So wrestling for me became an outlet to forget my real problems. So while my situation is nothing compared to your husband's, because I'm still alive, thank God. Um, Wrestling gave me a way to escape reality, and I'm sure you will agree that
Ab-
wrestling, when we were coming up in the business, it was perceived as real.
well, and
There we are. We're back now.
wrestling has been my escape, my distraction, whatever you want to call it. And I remember one time several years ago, I went to a show called Traditional Championship Wrestling. They ran in Arkansas for, I guess, till about 2013. And it was one of the first shows that my husband and I went to, and my son went to. And there was a little boy that had a poster there, and it says, wrestling is real, people are fake. I absolutely loved that poster. I had to go up and give that little boy a hug. And he says, well, Granny, are you a wrestler? And I said, no, baby, I'm not. I'm just a fan, just like you. But oh my gosh, the stories the memories that I have. I mean, because TCW, they did TV tapings, and they still show the old TV tapings in the Little Rock area on TV, like I think every Saturday night. And I still have people to this day asking me, hey, aren't you that lady from TCW? Aren't you Granny? I'm like, yeah, I am. And it's kind of ironic because, getting back to, when my husband was in the hospital the first time, one of the nurses that worked at the hospital where he was at, he came in one morning after his shift and he said, I've been trying to rack my brain where I know you and your husband from. And then it dawned, he said, the light bulb popped on. He says, you're Granny Hulkster. And he saw me at Wrestling for a Cause. And, I can go places and I may not know these people personally, but you hear the name Granny Hulkster and everybody knows who Granny is. I mean, I have a friend that was a independent professional wrestler. He retired, probably a couple of years ago, I guess. And he's a pastor now for a church. And so he doesn't wrestle anymore. But he posted on my Facebook page one time, he says, it's funny when you get a better pop and you're more recognizable than most professional wrestlers. Now, I'm nobody special. I'm just me. I am who I am. I'm nobody important. I am just me. But it's kind of funny because I went to the wrestling show over the weekend on Sunday for the Fight for Liam, and one of our wrestlers for Wrestling for a Cause, Dirty Dutch Hagen, he actually, that was going to be his last night in-ring competition. I guess he's retiring. I think he's got to have surgery on his shoulder, I believe. I'm not sure the exact reason why, but they said that was going to be his last night wrestling. He's still going to be around. He's just not going to be doing in-ring competition. And so I took my picture with him and took my picture with his tag team partner and manager, London Calling, because back in the day, I didn't like London Calling because they were the heels. And then they started this feud with Iron Mountain. Well, I don't like Iron Mountain. They're the bad guys. So I started cheering for London Calling. And I told, and excuse me, so Dutch made a comment on my post and he said, nobody gets the crowd going better than Granny Hulkster. Thank you for being the best fan in the building. And that just touched my heart so much.
Wait a
I
minute
said,
now.
say what?
Let me ask you if I can.
Yeah.
I said, let me ask you if I can, and sorry about the delay here, but
It's okay.
let me ask you. So how did you just start cheering, and somebody from the promotion saw you and then brought you into the promotion, or how did all that come about?
Well, I've been going to Wrestling for a Cause for 13 years. I've been going Wrestling for a Cause, but when they started the feud with Iron Mountain at Wrestling for a Cause, I didn't like Iron Mountain because they were more evil than London Calling was. But then London Calling kind of became the baby faces, So that's why I started cheering for London Calling, because they became the good guys, because Iron Mountain was trying to run WFC. They were trying to put London Calling out of commission totally. They cheated every which way they could to win their matches. And so it just came down to this match. They called it a coal miner's glove match. And they had this glove with spikes on the glove or whatever it was on it, up at the top of a pole. And whatever wrestler got to it first got to use it on their, opponent. And London Calling ended up winning the match, which I was so happy for. And then Tim Rockwell, the promoter of WFC, came out and made the announcement about Dutch, that was going to be his last night in-ring competition. And nobody knew. I mean, it was a total surprise to us all. Nobody knew what was going on. And so anyways, it was just a very emotional night for wrestling. It was just a really touching night, for WFC. And I love WFC. I love Wrestling for a Cause, and I will continue to support it as long as I'm able to. I mean, I'm 62 years old. I just turned 62 in August. But if it ever gets to the day where I cannot go to wrestling shows, y'all better be putting Granny out to pasture, because if I can't go to my wrestling, I don't know what I'm going to do,
Yeah, that's one of those. You're about like me. Just take me out to the backyard and just put me out of my misery, right?
Yep, sure, for sure. And so, but I told
People
Dutch,
don't.
I said, thank you for your kind words, Dutch. I said, David loved you just as much as I do, even though he gave you grief as much as I did, but it was all in good fun. I mean, but for him to say what he said to me about being the best fan, I mean, I took that very humbling, because I'm not the best fan in the building. There are very good fans in that building, and besides myself. And I was very humbled by his very kind thoughts and sentiments. So
Okay, now you and I became acquainted with one another because some fans on here may know that I came across what I'm going to call, they may have changed their name. Granny, help me out with this. But what I first knew was DCW, Down South Championship Wrestling, ran by our mutual friend Dwayne.
Yeah,
And I,
DC it's still DCW, Down South Championship Wrestling. They've been kind of teaming up with another company called Diamond State Wrestling. We were supposed to do a show in September, a big meet and greet and a big event in Greenwood, Arkansas, and unfortunately that had to get canceled. And then we recently did one November 2nd in Clarksville, Arkansas, which turned out to be a really good show. I don't know how long. I don't know if this is going to be a permanent thing that Dwayne's going to be doing, working with Diamond State, or if they're going to be merging together. I don't know all the details on that yet, so I don't really. I can't honestly say what's in the future on that aspect of everything, but we'll see. We're talking about possibly doing one around, I think, the 1st of February, but I don't have the exact details as of yet.
one of the things that I like not only about Dwayne personally, when he and I have talked on the phone and exchanged emails and stuff, is that his group and the people that he works with do it the old school way. They don't have 10 tables in the ring and Halloween candy, and they don't, touch a woman's breast or do anything. In other words, family oriented, old school entertainment,
Family friendly,
which
for sure.
is what wrestling was built on. And believe it, go ahead. I'm sorry, Granny.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I totally agree. Family friendly.
I get in trouble sometime with people that are younger than me. Like I told you, I'm 55. And I get in trouble with people that are younger than me sometimes. They're like, "Oh, Rusty, you're as bad as Cornette. You everything changes." Yes, Granny, everything changes, but sometimes things don't change for the better. And I truly believe, and back me up. And if you disagree with me, it's okay. But if you back me up, please. But I truly believe that wrestling, in order to get more interest in wrestling as a whole, I think we've got to go back to the old school just a little bit. You can't make people believe as much anymore because kayfabe is dead, but you can put a more realistic product. And as I said to you on the phone one night, you don't have to have 10 people going through a table and a bunch of thumbtacks to have a good match.
Very true. Very true. I mean, you know, I mentioned that I have met many wrestlers over the years, and I've had the opportunity to actually get to hang out with Ron Simmons, and Bobby Fulton. I picked them up last year for an event in Mulberry, Arkansas that we did for DCW. And I remember when I met Ron the first time with Tony Atlas about 4 or 5 years ago at an autograph signing that Dwayne was doing. Ron told me, he says, "Granny, you're that true fan that we don't see anymore at wrestling events," and then last year when he was with Bobby, we were talking, going down to the event, we were talking, and he says, "Granny," he says, "Dusty Rhodes would have loved you back in the day." He says, "I could see you walking to the ring with Dusty. I could see you sitting down having a conversation with Dusty." I mean, to me, that's very humbling because God rest his soul, Dusty Rhodes. I mean, I never got to meet Dusty. I've never gotten to meet Cody or Dustin. I would like to, and I hopefully someday I can. But for and Ron told the promoter, and Dwayne told me this. He says, "Granny did everything we asked her to do. She was professional. She went above and beyond to make sure we were taken care of." And he says, "When I come back, Granny better be the one picking me up at the airport or I'm not coming." So I helped Dwayne a lot. with picking up talent. I guess you could call me head of talent transportation, whatever you want to call that. Um, I'm very glad
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I'm very glad I get to do that because it gives me something to do. It keeps me involved in wrestling that I love, that I have so much of a passion for this sport. And I get to meet, I mean, I've picked up people like Brian Kendrick, Ron Simmons, Bobby Fulton, the Grapplers, my goodness, people like Chandler Hopkins, independent wrestlers, Chandler Hopkins. I mean, he's a personal friend of mine, I've met a lot of great people. I mean, I have had dinner with people like Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Tommy Dreamer. I know Ricky and Robert. I've got a picture wearing Robert Gibson's WWE Hall of Fame ring, and I didn't even ask if I could wear the ring. He put the ring on my finger for a picture. And a couple of years ago, when we went to WrestleMania 38 in Dallas with my friend, which I was glad we got to do that, especially now since David's gone. But that was a bucket list, a dream of ours. We went to WrestleCon, and of course, I wore my original Granny Hulkster shirt. The people from Fight TV did an interview with me, and the looks that I was getting. I mean, I met people like Lillian Garcia, Brooke Hogan, Lex Luger, Jeff Hardy. Um, I got to see Ted DiBiase and Mike Rotunda. I got to see Ron Simmons again. I got to see JBL again. I'm friends with Booker T. I mean, I love, I got to see Rikishi again, and I mean, just we were at an event in, I think it was July this year. It was WFC. It was called Extrava Slamsa 3, and the Godfather was there. Jim Duggan, Mr. Anderson, Chris Bay. I mean, Heath Slater. It's just, the names go on, and we found out that next year, so far the lineup is going to be Rikishi and Sergeant Slaughter. I've met Eric Rowan on several different occasions, and Braun Strowman, EC3. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And of course, TCW, when they ran, back in the day, I got to meet people like Jake Roberts. I've met Teddy Long, Diamond Dallas Page, Chris Masters, AJ Styles. I mean, I've just, it's just it's a blessing for me to be able to get to help with such a great opportunity, to help with whatever I help with when it comes to professional wrestling.
Yeah. Let's go back and talk about two names that you mentioned earlier. First, let's talk about a lesser known name, Brian Kendrick. Just for clarification, some of the fans here that listen to this might not know, but Brian Kendrick was Spanky in the WWF back in the day. And
Mhm.
Bobby Fulton, that Granny mentioned, was Bobby Fulton of the Fantastics, which was the tag team of Bobby
Tommy
Fulton
Rock.
and Tommy Rogers, most notably. And then later on, I think Bobby Fulton used his real life brother, Jackie, real name George Hines. So,
Mhm.
do you know if Bobby has beat his cancer diagnosis or is he still sick?
Uh, I believe. I mean, he was doing better last year when he was here for the event. I believe it's in remission. I haven't talked to him for quite a while, but I think he's doing well. And another person I forgot to mention, actually, a couple people I forgot to mention. I got to be friends with beautiful Bobby Eaton when TCW ran. Of course, we lost Bobby, 3 years ago. God rest his soul. Mark Buff Bagwell. I'm friends with him too. So it's just, I've met Jerry Lawler. I mean, gosh, I've just Bushwhacker Luke. I mean, Tommy Rich, Doug Gilbert, they were at the event that we had in Clarksville, Arkansas, so I mean, and I know there's people's name that I'm sure I've forgotten to mention, but I just, that's what I love about this business. I have, had the opportunity to get to know so many wonderful people, and I love it. I mean, I love being able to do what I do.
Yeah, obviously, with anything, there's both good and bad in everything. But a couple of the people that I have met that were lifelong friends until they passed away were Ivan Koloff, Don Kernodle, and also Abe Jacobs. You may not remember Abe Jacobs, but you can search him out on YouTube. But all three of
Remember,
them were very nice. And I used to
yes.
live near, I'm sorry, say it again.
No, I remember the name.
Yeah. I used to live near Lex Luger, but never met him then. But I met him one time at Ricky Steamboat's Mid Atlantic Gym in Charlotte, North Carolina, that used to be open. It's closed now, but it used to be open then. And
I've met
that was
Ricky.
back in the day when Lex was. Oh, cool. Ricky
Yeah, I've met Ricky.
Steamboat is probably one of the nicest.
He's awesome. Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Rick.
And
Yeah.
Trevor
And
Murdoch. I
so
forgot to
is.
mention
I only
Murdoch.
met Bobby Eaton once, but I tell you, oh, yeah. Trevor Murdoch trained at Harley Race's school in, I think
Got to
it's
meet Harley.
Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, I think.
I got to meet Harley Race before he passed away several years back when TCW was still running. So
I'm hopefully going to be able to interview Harley's son, Justin Race, coming up here pretty soon. And Justin is in the process of writing a book that's called Don't Tell Your Mother, which are stories that Harley told Justin while they were going from town to town and country to country. So that ought to be an interesting book when it eventually comes out.
yeah,
But so you just started. Go ahead.
say again.
You
No, no,
first.
no. I was going to say I'd forgot to mention about getting to meet Eugene, from back in the day, when he wrestled for WWE. He's an awesome person, and gosh, there's just so many. Like I said, I know there's names that I'm forgetting that I've met, and I apologize to all the wrestling world out there if I forgot to mention your name if I've met you. But I've met a lot of people over the years, so.
I'll tell you a quick story real quick, and then we'll move on because this is about you, not about me. But long story short, there was a guy. He hasn't had many matches over the last few years, but he worked a lot on the independent circuit. Big, heavy set black guy by the name of Freight Train. He's about 6 foot tall, about 300 pounds. He's a mentally challenged guy, and a lot of people don't want to book him because he's mentally challenged. And he worked for a promotion that's no longer in business called $5 Wrestling. And one of the greatest matches he ever had was a match between Freight Train and Eugene, Nick Dinsmore. And a lot of people didn't want to work with Charles Freight Train because Charles was mentally challenged, and most people know it. And even if you don't know it, you can sort of pick up on it. No offense. I'm not trying to offend anybody. But the point I'm trying to make is I wasn't there, but I heard secondhand that, Nick just said, hey, let's go out there and do it, man. I'll call it. And they had one of the most best matches that I've ever seen Freight Train Charles have. So it worked out good for everybody. He's a real special human being.
Oh, Well, let's see. I'm just trying to think of any other funny
Be back in a minute.
stories.
Granny, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was
Okay.
just trying to think of any other funny stories that I could actually share with the listeners because I've got so many. I mean, I remember, oh, okay. I remember Cowboy Bob Orton. I have met him many a times. And I was at a show in Harrison, Arkansas for Mid States Wrestling. It was one of the legend shows that they did. Bill Dundee was there, Bobby Eaton was there, and Bob Orton was in the match wrestling, and everything. And of course, Granny doesn't like the heels, so he literally stops in the middle of the match and he looks at me and he's standing in the corner and he puts his fist on his hip and he stomps his foot and he starts shaking his finger at me. He says, "Granny, I thought we were friends." And I said, "We are, Bob." And he says, "Then why are you booing me?" I said, "Because you're not being a very nice guy right now." And Bobby Eaton was there, and Brian Thompson says, "Granny, what are you doing here?" No, Brian Thompson was Bobby Eaton's booking manager. And I said, "Brian," I said, "hush up." I said, "I came to see Bobby, not see you." And Bobby says, "Yeah, Brian, leave Granny alone before I have to hurt you." Like I said, I've met so many great people over the years. I mean, in this business, gosh, wrestling just brings back so many great memories, for me of times that I was at TCW because like they said, they did TV tapings, and when we were there, they always had me in the front row in the center seat facing the camera because they knew that I would interact with the wrestlers. Now, Tommy Dreamer, the last show that TCW did, I was getting ready to have my first knee replacement on my right knee, so I was having to walk with a cane. Tommy Dreamer grabs my cane out of my hand and uses it on Matt Riviera. And they're like, "Oh my God, he's got Granny Hulkster's cane." And the crowd's going wild, and everything. And he walks away and he starts swinging my cane. Well, it was one of those fold up ones, so it looked like he broke my cane. And he's like, "Oh my God, he broke Granny's cane." And he comes back and he takes the handle and he tucks it under Matt's tights and he pulls up on it and gave him the biggest wedgie I'd ever seen in my life and made Matt Riviera start hopping like a bunny rabbit. And he brings me back my cane and he's holding it by the strap. And he says, "Granny," he says, "you might need to sanitize this. It's really stinky right now." I mean, it just, they love, I mean, the promoters, they love when I'm there because they know that I'll help get the crowd going and they'll get the Granny Hulkster chant going. And, the bad, like, "Quit chanting her name. Nobody wants to hear her name. Nobody likes her." And I said, "Everybody loves Granny. The bad guys even love me. They just don't want to admit it." So.
Well, have you ever noticed? I said this to you on the phone one night, but I'd like for you to back me up here. Have you ever noticed that people down south, whether it be Charlotte, North Carolina, where I used to live, or Arkansas, where you used to live, I mean, where you live, and just the southern parts of the country take wrestling a lot more serious, and wrestling fans are much more dedicated down south, southern parts of the country, than they are in the northern parts. And I don't know if that's because WWF never took wrestling seriously and everybody else did, or if it's just a southern thing. But yeah, for a southern boy like me, I'm like you. I love wrestling. I don't know what would have happened to me in my early days had it not been for pro wrestling, because it wasn't like I could go outside and play with other children or anything. So
Oh,
I get
definitely.
where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the fans are really, I mean, the fans are just really into it. I've been to some shows where the crowd just, they think it's just absolutely the best thing around, and even now, like, because I'm originally from Kansas. So, I've been to shows, in Kansas City, wrestling shows, and the fans up there are pretty good too. I mean, I think it just depends. I don't know. You know, everybody is so different.
And if you
There's
can,
some people, everybody's so different. There's some fans that just like, they're like, they'll sit there and they'll just, whatever, they don't get into the show, or they don't get into the, event or whatever. Or they're sitting there just playing on their phone or whatever, watching, looking at their phone, and they're not paying attention to what's going on. But for the
which I
most
don't really
part,
understand because, yeah,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, I don't understand that because why would you go to a wrestling show and most people have to pay to get in? And why would you pay to get in and then sit there and play on your phone? That doesn't make much sense.
Well, it doesn't make much sense to me either, but for the most part, every show that I've ever been a part of, the fans are really into what's going on. They're watching, they're cheering, they're booing, they're really involved in it, and I really haven't had that much problem of being at a show where I remember I was at an independent show one time. It was over in Jay, Oklahoma. Now, Jay, Oklahoma is not very big. It's a little town, in Oklahoma. And they maybe had, I don't know, 30 or 40 people, maybe 50 people at that event, because the building was kind of small, so it didn't have a lot of room to fit a lot of people. But I remember hearing one of the wrestlers in the back say before the show started, "Well, it's going to be a great show. Granny's in the house." Like, I'm like, okay, guys, I'm just me, I'm nobody, important. I'm just, but I'm very blessed. My wrestling family, when I lost David, they were like, they just totally reached out to me. I mean, they're still, even to this day, 9 months later, they're still checking on me, making sure that I'm okay. Hey, you need anything, Granny? Are you doing okay? Is there anything we can help you with? And I'm like, and that's one thing that people, I don't think people understands this, Rusty. When you talk about family, you don't have to be blood related to be family. When you're part of a wrestling family, they're your family. I mean, and I remember a couple of different times Trevor Murdoch did a seminar for Tim Rockwell at Wrestling for a Cause. And I remember the first one that he did. Now, for the majority part, the normal fan would not get to sit in on a seminar. You know that. I mean, that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
But I was bringing
exactly.
merchandise at the time for, picking up t-shirts and stuff. So I always got to be in the building early. Well, I actually got to set in on that seminar. And he was talking to the guys about how to work the crowd. He says, then you have people like that God-fearing, loving woman over there, Granny Hulkster, start talking about smart marks. And he started pointing my way. And I thought Tim Rockwell was going to fall off the ring rope laughing, and I said, Trevor, I don't know everything. He says, darling, you know more than most. And then the next one he did, he was saying, go to Granny, use her as your goal, make her mad, piss her off. And I said, Trevor, don't give him any ideas. They already do that, And I mean, and it's like this gentleman, he's a really good friend. He's a manager for several of the wrestlers at Mid States in Harrison, Arkansas. His name's Stephen E., and I call him Stephanie. And it's just a long story that we have back, that we came up with. And he says, he says, Granny, he says, you and David and Anthony, you're part of that extended family, extended wrestling family. And, that's what makes it so great about this business, is you don't have to be blood related to be family. And sometimes I don't think people understands that when, you talk about, and I've told people this, I say, listen, if I had a problem or if I needed help, all I would have to do is pick up a phone, make a phone call, and if they could be there to help me, they would, so um that's what I love about this sport. That's what I love about the business is, I
Yeah, a lot of times you hear more bad things about wrestling than you do good. But even
true.
outside of wrestling, I agree with you that you don't have to be blood related. I've got a home health aide here tonight that is closer to me than my own mother is sometimes. So I, you're right. You don't have to be blood related to be family. You just got to care about one another. And
That's true.
it's sad that too many people don't care about each other enough. And the wrestling business is so competitive where everybody is usually trying to outdo the other or get someone's spot, so to speak, or spot on the card, whatever you want to call it, that sometimes that gets overshadowed. But it's nice to hear that they've been a good family for you, and it sounds like a good support system both before and after your husband passed away.
Yeah, absolutely. I am totally honored and blessed, and when we did Extrava Slams of Three, I have a very good friend that actually came up with my design of me on a t-shirt, and I actually have those printed on t-shirts. And one of the sponsors from Extrava Slams of Three, he paid for like $500 worth of t-shirts to be printed up for me to sell at Extrava Slams of Three this year. And I'm like, Marty, I'm not a wrestler, I'm just a fan. And he said, Granny, he says, you are amazing. He says, and he was telling me this last year at Extrava Slams of Two, he says, we're going to have you a merchandise table set up. You're going to sell merchandise. I never thought in all the years that I've been Granny Hulkster that I would actually have merchandise. I actually have bracelets that says Granny Hulkster #1 fan, and on the back it says support independent professional wrestling. I've got t-shirts, and I never thought I would ever have merchandise. And I had a youth size t-shirt that I gave to Liam Sunday night. I gave him the youth size t-shirt with my picture on it and one of my Granny Hulkster bracelets. So, and he was just from ear to ear, just smiling from ear to ear. And he really had a great time.
Yeah, we've had several technical problems here, so I'd like to apologize to anybody seeing this, but I'd like to apologize to you. It's been a bad internet signal, so I don't know if you covered this or not because I couldn't hear part of one of your last responses. But who came up with the idea of having any merchandise?
Well, for years, people kept asking me, Granny, do you got t-shirts for sale? And I'm like, no, I don't. And it always kind of entered the back of my mind. But like I said, I wasn't a wrestler, and so when I did like pre-orders, and I finally got those pre-ordered shirts printed up, and then, Marty bought the other t-shirts to be printed up that I sold, and I've got some left. I don't have a lot of them left, but I've got some, and I'm probably going to try to sell through what I have before I do any more, or if I do any more. I haven't really decided if I'm going to do any more or not. If I have a demand for it, I might, but I, and I only bring them um, if I get permission from the promoter where I can bring them in and sell them inside. I do, but if I don't have permission, I don't bring it inside to an event. If somebody wants it, I'll go out to my car and say, hey, I've got, some out in my car, come look and see what I have, because I don't want to take away from the wrestlers that are selling their merchandise, because I'm not a wrestler. I'm just a fan. but the fans, they love me. I think that they love me just as much as the wrestlers do. I really do, because I asked Tim Rockwell when he first started WFC. I asked him one time, we went to the second show they did for WFC, and I said, Tim, I said, I've known you a long time before, you ever started WFC. I said, do you even know what my real name is? And he says, no, all I've ever known you by was Granny. And, the wrestlers call me Granny, their spouses call me Granny, their kids call me Granny, the fans call me Granny. I mean, I'm Granny Hulkster to the wrestling world. I mean, I have a friend, actually, I have a friend, well, we went to WrestleMania 38 with him, and, he, and like I said, I've met some of the big time name wrestlers, that have been a part of WWE over the years. I've never met Hulk Hogan. Got to meet his daughter Brooke a couple years ago when I was at WrestleCon. That was a very nice experience. And I'm hoping to, maybe get to meet Hulk Hogan someday. I don't know if it'll ever happen or not, but we'll see.
Yeah. It's just amazing how life takes you in different directions and how you run across people. I mean, I got started by my cousin knowing one of the Crockett's, the late Jackie Crockett, who passed away in 2024, who, after the Crockett sold out to Ted Turner, was a WCW cameraman. But at the time when I met Jackie, he was 1/5 owner of Jim Crockett Promotions. So we all have different paths that bring us into the wacky world of wrestling. But I think you will agree that once you get involved and become a wrestling fan, it kind of gets in your blood. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't deny that at all, because like I said, if it ever gets to the point, because I was telling somebody one day, I said, what are you all going to do when it gets to the day that Granny can't come to your shows? They said, oh, we'll come get you, Granny. I'm like, yeah, right. I live in Arkansas. You live in Oklahoma. I don't think so. But, you know, um, if that day ever comes where I can't go to wrestling, y'all better just, like, adios, people. I'm out of here, like I'm gone, and,
Yeah.
life goes on, but, hopefully that won't be, you know, for a few more years yet. Hopefully I have a little bit, left to do. And I always wondered, after I quit work, and couldn't work anymore because of my health issues, I thought, well, what's my purpose in life? Because in 2004, I lost my daddy in 2004, July 15th of 2004, he passed away. And David and I'd only been dating about 8 months. And I ended up in the hospital with what they thought was a blood clot in my leg. Well, come to find out, lo and behold, I actually had two blood clots. And while I was in the hospital, one of those clots broke loose and went to my right lung. And the doctor told me, he said, if you had not come in the night you did to the hospital, you would not be alive today. So looking back at that, 20 years ago, I thought, well, God wasn't ready to take me away yet. And of course, that was kind of even before Granny Hulkster ever, came into the picture. I was just Lori, wrestling fan, and that was it. I wasn't, Granny Hulkster. I didn't get the name Granny Hulkster. So probably, oh my gosh, like I said, it's been about probably 15, maybe 16 years, something like that. I mean, I've had it a while, it's been so long since I got the nickname. Um, I would say, yeah, probably 15 or 16 years, because I was still working when I actually got the name from one of my coworkers. So yeah, 2009, 2010. So yeah, it's been close to 15, 16 years, something like that.
Yeah, I think even though your situation was obviously a little bit different than mine, I think we both sort of came it it wrestling offered us an outlet to forget our real problems in real life. And for both of us, I think I can speak for you in saying this. I'm not exactly sure that, hang on just a second. Um, uh, Hold on a minute. I'm sorry about this.
Oh, you're fine.
Hey, I'll call you right back. Um, anyway, I'm not sure that the average wrestling fan understands how addictive the wrestling business can be when you become a true wrestling fan. I've tried to stop wrestling. I mean, I've tried to stop watching wrestling or caring about the inner workings of the business several times over the last 20 years because I just don't like the way the big time promotions are doing things. And every time I say, I'm going to stop, this is it, I'm not going to watch it anymore, it only lasts about a day or two. And then I'm back on YouTube or reading the dirt sheets or
You're
going
back.
on the internet. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
back. I'm back trying to find out what's going on, you know?
My problem is I have so many friends that do independent shows. The problem that I run into is a lot of times their shows are on the same day. And it's like there's just not enough of me to go around. I try to support everybody, but I don't always get to go when I want to go, it's just, it makes it hard. Somebody jokingly told me one time, they said, well, Granny, start charging a booking fee, see who wants you the most. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Y'all are family. I'm not going to charge you booking fees to say, oh, we got to have Granny at our show. We got to have a Granny at our show, and I mean, and it's funny. It's funny. Like, I helped with a show back in, I want to say it was June, maybe July. I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas. It was called Vapors Championship Wrestling. And the general manager, he's a personal friend of mine, and he actually had to work that night of the event, so he couldn't be there. So they came up with a storyline where he got viciously attacked by Jackson Palace from Tribulation while they were at a baseball game for Michael's birthday. So here's Michael, doing this video on the phone like he's talking to me, and everything. Yeah, we're glad you're coming. We're excited about you being here, and da 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 da. And so I got to be their interim general manager for the night. And so I come out, from behind the curtain. I get in the ring. I tell everybody who I am, why I'm there, and all of a sudden Tribulation shows up, and one of the gentlemen I've known for probably about 10 years, and I said, remember when I put that pink tutu on you at that wrestling show? I said, well, guess what? If I had that pink tutu tonight, you'd be wearing it again. And everybody started laughing. He's like, oh, nobody wants to hear that, And I said, well, they're going to hear it. And I slapped him, and Jackson, he gets in my face, and I slapped him. And, Wayne gets in my face, and he says, he told me backstage before, the show started, he says, slap me hard enough where it knocks my mask off. And I did, I said, well, you better be careful what you wish for. It just might happen. And I slapped his mask off of his face. And so they start to come at me. And well, this tag team comes out called Lightning Storm. And one of them had a folding chair, and I said, well, as you can see, boys, Granny didn't come alone. And I said, and Jackson, I've been doing my research. And I said, I found out that you and Logan don't like each other. So tonight, Granny's issuing a tag team match between you, Tribulation, and Lightning Storm. And my one friend that I said that I was going to put the tutu on, he says, you don't have the authority. And I said, I have all the authority in the world I want and need, because you forget Granny is in charge tonight of this show. Nobody else but me. And the crowd was just, oh, I mean, it was so much fun. I just, oh God, I loved it. I had so much fun doing that.
Yeah, I've been there. I know exactly what you're trying to say. I think it's hard for the average wrestling fan to understand that about how, as I said earlier, how it can get in your blood and it just doesn't seem to go away. But I guess I should let you go. We've been talking for about an hour now, so I'll let you go. But is there anything that you want to say or cover that we didn't cover? It sounds like you've had a real good career in wrestling, and I'd like to have you back sometime to share some more stories. Heck, it sounds like you've got more
I
stories
would,
these days than I do.
well, first of all, thank you again for having me on as a part of your podcast tonight. I would love to come back where we could talk more wrestling, or just whatever, whatever anybody wants to talk about, is good too. And I just, it's been an honor and a pleasure, Rusty, to be on with you tonight, and I appreciate it. And fans, I always tell this people, support your independent wrestling, because without the fans, that's what makes the wrestling, is the fans. I mean, if you don't have the fans, you're not going to have the wrestling, and that's what makes the wrestling so much fun, is the fans. And so go out, support your independent professional wrestling shows. Whether you boo them or cheer them or whatever, just go out and have a good time. Support those independent wrestling shows in your areas. I try to support mine as often as I can. I go once a month, sometimes I go twice a month, sometimes I may end up going, 2 or 3 times in a month. It varies, but go out and support those independent wrestling shows. Show them that you care, show them that you love them, because I know the more you cheer and the more you boo and the more you interact, trust me, the harder these guys are going to work for you to give you all the best possible show that they can possibly do for you all.
And I think one last thing I think we should probably touch on real quick here is that, most of the guys that work on independent local area wrestling, they don't make a lot of money. Heck, most of the shows I've seen, most of the guys are lucky to make enough money to have gas to put in their car. So independent wrestlers are either wrestlers that are trying to make it to the big stage, or they're wrestlers that used to be down. But to your point, independent wrestling doesn't have a lot of money behind it usually, like WWE or AEW or TNA. So we really need to get out and support independent wrestling, whether you live in the north, south, east, or west of the country.
That's true. Very true.
Yeah, well, Granny, thanks a lot for coming on. And like I said, I'd like to have you back real soon. And I hope I didn't hold you up too long. It sounds like you've got more stories than I've got these days. So we'll definitely have you back
I don't know.
some
I
point in the
don't
near
know about
future.
that. I don't know about that, but I'm sure that I could probably think of a few more stories to share. Like I said, I know there's people that I've met, in the wrestling business that I have forgotten to mention, but and I apologize for that, because like I said, I've met so many wonderful people over the years through wrestling, some big name people, over the years. I I have a very good referee friend in Texas, James Beard, and he's been a very good friend of mine for a long time. I've met Lanny Poffo, Randy Savage's brother. I had the opportunity to meet Lanny before he passed away, and I actually have his book that he'd written about the the poetry, that he wrote about the poem, like when he was the genius, back in the WWE days and things like that. You know, Arn Anderson, the Pope. I mean, Chavo Guerrero. Like I said, I've met so many great people over the years that I'm just, as a fan, I am just truly blessed to have gotten to know and meet um, some of the great names of wrestling. I'm hoping at some point in time, I'd like to be able to join the Cauliflower Alley Club and become a member of that, because that's like on my bucket list to actually go to a Cauliflower Alley Club reunion at some point in time while I'm still able to. I hope that happens. Don't know if it will or not, but I'm hoping.
I understand that. And two quick things, I'll let you go for sure. Number one, in case the fans don't recognize the name James Beard, he was a referee back in the day for World Class Championship Wrestling, and then later on the Global Wrestling Federation, which was the Joe Pedicino group that ran after World Class folded up. And also, James Beard has done a lot of stuff in the NWA, and there used to be another promotion in Texas called something World Class, or I don't know the exact name, but the point is you got to get up pretty early in the morning to not remember who James Beard is. He's one of the legendary referees in this business, no doubt about
and,
that.
and he was also in the movie The Iron Claw.
I didn't know that. I'll close it out after this, I promise, because I've taken up too much of your time already. But I
You're
chose
fine.
not to watch that. Okay, I chose not to watch that movie, The Iron Claw, because I've watched Heroes of World Class and other documentaries that were more realistic than The Iron Claw was. And when I heard that they took one of the deaths of the Von Erichs out of the Iron Claw, which I think it was Chris's death, Chris Von Erich. Then I decided not to watch it. But now that I know that James Beard was in that movie, I'll have to go back and take a look at
Yeah,
it.
he's actually
Because, like I said, James.
one of the referees in that movie. I'm trying to recall which part it was. I mean, I saw it and I enjoyed the movie. I mean, I know I've heard pros and cons about people talking about it, but I was a big Von Erich fan back in the days. I've never met Kevin. I would like to meet Kevin at some point in time. I don't know if I will or not, but I loved to watch Kerry wrestle when he wrestled. I mean, I was a Von Erich fan back in the days. So, like I said, but I do appreciate you having me on, and fans, everybody have a great week. Stay safe out there, hug your loved ones, because fans, let's face it, you know, live today as if it's going to be your last, because tomorrow's not promised for anyone. So love your loved ones, hug your loved ones. If you're struggling with whatever you're struggling with, reach out and find somebody to talk to. If you're needing help, with something, reach out to somebody and talk to somebody, because you know I've lost a lot of friends over the years, because they were going through some struggles and they didn't reach out and get the help that they needed. So, Granny's the type of person that I'm a very people person. I love people. I love kids. I love talking to people. I love talking to wrestling fans. But seriously, our world is just, our world is not what it used to be. And, it's a sad situation sometimes. You just have to live day by day and one day at a time, as the old saying goes. But on that note, God bless everybody. Everybody take care. And I'll be looking forward to coming back on again soon.
Oh, absolutely. We'll definitely have you back, and we'll try to make it earlier in the day so that we don't have all these technical internet stream problems that we've had. But thank you very much, Granny, and we'll look forward to seeing you down the road. And I'll be in touch with you off air real soon. But thank you for your time, and it was
Welcome.
really a blessing. I can't put into words how how nice it was to do this, because even though I knew some of the stories, I didn't even know all of them, and even though I knew some of them, it was still a blessing to pass this on to other people that might not know who you were. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Take care.
All right, bye bye now.
Bye.